Bridesmaid friend can't handle her husband walking with my maid of honor at my wedding, and it's tearing our friendship apart. My fiancé, Mike, and I are getting married next year, and we've started inviting our closest friends to stand with us on our big day. Mike asked his high school friend, Tim, to be his best man. Last August, Mike and I were actually both best man and maid of honor at Tim's wedding. I wasn't originally supposed to be Mo at their wedding. Tim's wife, Heather, had a falling out with her original maid of honor, and I was the next in line to step up. For context, their bridal party had 3 bridesmaids and 3 groomsmen. Each bridesmaid was coupled with a groomsman, and everyone was paired with their own significant other. Initially, this wasn't the plan, but with all the changes from Heather's falling out, one of the groomsmen's fiancés was brought into the bridal party, so every spot lined up, couples together. When it came time for our wedding, I think the first crack in my relationship with Heather appeared when Mike asked Tim to be best man, but I didn't ask Heather to be maid of honor. I still wanted her to be an important part of my day, so I invited her to be a bridesmaid and gave her a beautiful bridesmaid proposal basket. She seemed genuinely happy with the gesture. But only a few days later, Heather reached out and confided that it hurt she wasn't chosen as my maid of honor since I had stepped in as hers. I tried to explain that I value her friendship deeply and wanted her to be integral to my day, but my relationship with my current maid of honor is different. I had to think about things like availability and responsibility, which is why I made that decision. I apologized for unintentionally hurting her and promised I'd find ways for her to be more involved. At that point, I left the conversation believing we'd resolve things. A few weeks passed, and Heather approached me again, this time sharing her concerns about my entire wedding party lineup. She's never actually met my maid of honor, but she told me she gets bad vibes from her, and the thought of my Mo walking paired with Tim made her feel uncomfortable. She explained that our wedding would be the first time she would see Tim walk down the aisle with someone who wasn't her, and that it would be strange after just getting married themselves. Heather asked me if she and Tim could walk into both our ceremony and reception together, to help her feel better. I told her that Mike and I wanted to honor the traditional processional order, best man and maid of honor walk together. Heather is paired up with Mike's brother, whom she's never had an issue with. It's really just the idea of Tim and my Mo that bothers her. This has been a back and forth between us 4 months now. I've consistently and gently told Heather that the wedding entrance reflects our preference and the tradition we'd like to uphold, but she counters that I'm not considering her marital boundaries and accuses me of being selfish and a bad friend for not caving. She even suggested that maybe all the bridesmaids and all the groomsmen could enter together, not as pairs at all. Mike and I considered her suggestion, discussed it at length, but ultimately decided we really want to do things our way. We've been through enough weddings to know there are many ways to do it, but this is what feels right for us. No one else in the wedding party has raised any issue, just Heather. Lately, Heather's been withdrawing. Where we used to text all day, every day, now her messages have dropped to maybe 1 a day, no matter how many I send her. She's also been posting cryptic, pointed messages about losing respect for people and friends, revealing their true colors. It's become more obvious something shifted. I reached out and asked her directly if something was wrong or if there was a reason she'd been distant, reminding her of our last conversation where we agreed that maybe she could meet my maid of honor and all of us could spend some time together so she could get to know her and, hopefully, feel less uncomfortable. Heather agreed at the time to give that a try, but when I ask about her distance now, she brushes it off and claims everything's fine and that she's just been away from her phone. I don't really believe it, especially after a mutual friend hinted otherwise during a recent chat. At this point, I'm seriously considering asking Heather to step out of the wedding if she can't accept our choices and be more supportive of Mike and me. I realize this might prompt Tim to step down as best man as well, but Mike and I have agreed that would be Tim's decision to make, which would ultimately reveal where his priorities and values stand. It weighs heavily on me, and I just wish I could see if I'm missing something here, if I'm overlooking a perspective where I'm actually in the wrong in this whole mess. It's been about 3 months since everything started unraveling, and what a ride it's been, so buckle up. After everything that happened, a mutual friend had a wedding, and both Heather and I were there. She made absolutely no effort to speak to me when I tried to approach her for some small talk. She shut me down after barely a few words. I even found out from another mutual friend that Heather and her mom spent most of the reception gossiping about me. The day after the wedding, I decided to reach out to Heather. I'd noticed her avoidance and genuinely wanted to clear the air if something was wrong, so I texted her, asking if there was something going on between us. She just said she didn't want to talk about it. At this point, she and I had been having issues for over 3 months, and from what I was hearing, she was still upset about Tim walking with my Mo in our wedding. I ended up telling her directly if this really came down to our choices about the walking order for the ceremony and reception, those choices were final. I told her and Tim to let me know by the end of the week if they weren't comfortable with those decisions. She didn't answer until a week later, and then asked if we could talk by phone. Emotions were high, and I don't remember every single word, but the gist of it was shocking. Heather just jumped right in, telling me she'd never be okay with Tim walking with my Mo because she thought my Mo was trashy. She said she didn't want Tim to speak to or touch my Mo, and that she herself would refuse to speak to or even acknowledge my Mo at all. The only way Tim and my Mo could do the processional and reception entrance together, Heather said, would be if they literally didn't speak or touch even during their planned fun or goofy entrance for the reception. When I pressed on how they'd plan the entrance if they couldn't even communicate, or if texting was okay, Heather flat out said absolutely not. Instead, she said communication would have to go through her, as though she'd played telephone between them. This was too much. I told Heather that this whole plan would only stir up more drama among the whole wedding party. I said I didn't expect her and Tim to become best friends with my Mo, but the least I expected was civility. It really bothered me that Heather was making such harsh judgments about my Mo whom she still had never met and was so disrespectful. I told her, again, that our wedding decisions weren't changing, and that she should talk to Tim about their next steps. That's when she started screaming at me for over half an hour, calling me selfish and horrible. I finally had to hang up on her. Right after that call, she texted me an apology, saying she cared about me and Mike and wanted to focus on our friendship. I told her I needed some space to think things over. After a lot of conversations with my fiancé, I came to a decision. I no longer felt comfortable having Heather stand in our wedding. The way she'd been treating me, and especially the way she spoke to me during that call, hurt me beyond what an apology could fix. But I wanted to give Mike the chance to talk things over with Tim first. A few weeks later, Tim came over to our home by himself to talk to Mike. I left to get them privacy. According to my fiancé, Tim said he needed to step down, and that Mike should have him walk with Heather instead. Mike explained to Tim how I'd been feeling and the decision we made to remove Heather from the wedding party. Tim said he wouldn't be allowed to participate if Heather was out, so he was stepping out completely. After that, I told Heather over text, which I didn't want to do, but after the last phone call I couldn't face a repeat. I explained everything I'd felt, how deeply her words and actions had hurt me these last few months. She told me that there would be no coming back from that choice, and that I was only making things worse. I stood firm. She never replied. For the past month since removing her, everything has escalated. Heather's mother sent a mutual friend a message, basically implying that my friend would be a terrible person if she stayed in touch with me and didn't take Heather's side. That friend and her husband, who both stood up in Heather and Tim's wedding, cut off all contact with Heather and Tim. Meanwhile, Heather started telling her family and co-workers I kicked her out because she wasn't okay with Tim and my Mo exchanging phone numbers. I had to block her on all social media because people told me she was obsessively watching everything I did, reading into every post and like. Once she realized she was blocked, she started using Tim's phone to look at my pages, so I had to block him too. My Mo did the same for both of them. Now, from what I've heard, Heather talks about nothing else to her other friends. She actually told someone that she expects me to show up at her house and apologize eventually, and that she won't talk to me until I do. Recently, it even sounded like she was on the verge of destroying her relationship with the final couple who stood up in her own wedding, meaning now she's shut off from everyone who was in her wedding party. She hasn't tried to reach out in any way, and honestly, I'm okay with that. Now I'm just trying my best to live my Heather-free life and ignore her obsession with this whole thing. I just hope, eventually, she gives it up. Update 2. My Mo planned a small brunch shower for me at a little garden restaurant, just immediate bridal party and a few close friends. Low key on purpose. A week before, my Mo forwarded me a weird DM from a brand new account asking what time our little brunch started and whether there would be assigned seating. The phrasing sounded familiar, and when my Mo replied, "Who is this?" the account vanished. We both got that sick feeling. We called the restaurant, added a note to the reservation to not give out details to anyone not on the list, and set a code word because neither of us wanted a scene. The morning of the shower, I walked in and actually let myself relax. My mom was there, my future mill. My Mo had blue hydrangeas everywhere, my favorite. We were about 20 minutes in when the host walked over with that tight smile that says, "We have a situation." He quietly told me 2 women at the front insisted they belonged with us. I didn't even have to ask who. My stomach dropped. My Mo said she'd go talk to them, but I told her I'd do it. I didn't want anyone else getting dragged in. Heather was at the host stand in a white sundress with her mom, holding a gift bag with my married initials on it like we were best friends. She said, "We came to show support," like she hadn't iced me out of her life and then scorched the earth. I reminded her we'd asked for space and that she wasn't invited. She looked past me into the room and asked, "Is Tim seated near the door?" Like he might pop out of the hedge wall. I told her Tim wasn't there because it was a shower, and she smiled in that way that's less teeth and more warning. Good, she said. We should talk woman to woman. I told her there was nothing left to talk about. She put the bag in my hands anyway. Open it, she said. I didn't want to, but the host was hovering and I just wanted this to be over. Inside was a neatly typed agreement of boundaries with our names at the top like a rental contract, 4 pages of rules about no private conversations, no direct eye contact, and no palm-to-palm contact at any time between my Mo and Tim, along with a pair of white satin gloves and a little bottle of hand sanitizer. She had highlighted a section that said she'd act as liaison if my Mo needed to coordinate anything with Tim. I stared at it. My hands were actually shaking. I handed the bag back and said, as calmly as I could, absolutely not. Her mom chimed in about how girls like my Mo don't respect marriages, and I told the host he could ask them to leave. Heather didn't move. She started in on the same speech I've heard a dozen times about loyalty and true colors and how I owed her leadership after everything, like I work for her and this was a performance review. People in the lobby were watching. I kept saying, this isn't the place, and finally the manager came over. He was a saint. He gave them the option to go or he'd call security. Heather leaned in and hissed at me, you're going to regret embarrassing me again, like I'd done this to her on a stage and not at a brunch she crashed by choice. They left in a flurry. I went into the bathroom and cried until my face cooled down enough to pretend I was excited about mimosas again. I thought that was the peak, but the next morning I woke up to an email from Tim from his work account. The subject line was just I'm sorry. He said he didn't know she was going to show up at my shower and that he only found out because she came home mad I wouldn't sign something reasonable. He told me very carefully that they had started counseling after he stepped down and that things were harder than he expected. He said she'd called our venue and our photographer trying to confirm a cancellation because she'd heard we were changing the wedding day, but the vendors had asked for the code phrase and when she didn't have it, they told her they couldn't discuss anything. He wanted me to know to lock everything down. My Mo had already done that. She's a machine. Every vendor has my voice passcode now, and they all know only Mike or I can make changes. I wrote back to Tim thanking him for the heads up and told him point blank, not to contact me again about Heather and to go through Mike if he needed him. It felt cold, but my hands were shaking just typing his name. He responded once with, understood. I'm sorry for my part in this. Save the date started going out the following week. That afternoon I got a text from an unknown number that just said, countdown starts now, with a coffin emoji and a link. I didn't click it. Then my Mo sent me a screenshot from one of the bridesmaids. It was a long Facebook post on Heather's page. My name was never written, but my city, our venue's neighborhood, and some very specific details about women who force men to abandon vows to perform at their parties didn't leave much to the imagination. Our mutuals were already tagging it in their heads. I blocked the unknown number, blocked 2 more burners, and kept every single message. That night I had to explain to my dad what a burner account was. He poured us both a whiskey and said, very simply, we don't let people like this in the door. The next big blow-up wasn't mine. One of the couples who had distanced themselves from Heather, people who were actually in her wedding party, invited me and my Mo over for a game night. We were halfway through a round of code names when a car pulled into their driveway, like a bat out of hell. It was Heather. She banged on the door and demanded they hand me over. I was sitting on their couch in socks, holding a handful of cards, and I honestly thought I might pass out. My friend's husband opened the door the smallest amount and told her she was trespassing. She started screaming about how no one respected marital boundaries anymore, and that if I had anything to say I should say it to her face. I stood behind the couch and said, as level as I could, leave. You are not welcome here. She tried to push the door. He held it. She yelled for Tim to get out of the car so we could all talk like adults. That's when we saw there was no one else in the car. My friend told her he was calling the police. She left with tires squealing. 10 minutes later my Mo checked our Ring camera and realized a car that looked like hers had driven by my house twice in the last hour. We filed a report the next morning. I hated doing it, but I slept for the first time in weeks after that. 2 days after the drive-by, Mike got a text from Tim asking if they could talk. He said he'd come alone and he did. He looked like he hadn't slept. He apologized to both of us for how everything had bled into our lives. He admitted Heather had been reading his emails, and that was why he'd reached out from work before. He said counseling had stopped after 1 session because Heather told the therapist she refused to participate in a gang-up. Then he said the part I didn't expect to hear: he was staying with his brother. He'd packed a bag after the game night incident because he was tired of being angry every day at people who hadn't done anything to us. He wasn't asking to be invited back into the wedding. He just wanted Mike to know he loved him and was sorry. Mike hugged him and cried in our kitchen. I don't think I've ever loved Mike more than I did watching him set a hard boundary with someone he considers a brother while still being gentle enough to hand him leftovers and ask if he needed a place to crash. I didn't tell Tim about the police report. I didn't tell him about the vendor code words. I did tell him we'd keep his confidence and that any contact moving forward should be between the two of them. He nodded. He said, I know you don't owe me anything, but thank you. When he left, I went to the bedroom, sat on the floor, and let it all out. It felt like grief. There was one last twist I never would have guessed. Our venue reached out a week later to confirm final head counts for the tasting. The coordinator casually asked if we would still be bringing the 2 additional guests we added last week. I told her we hadn't added anyone. She read the note back to me, bride requests +2 for her friend Heather and her mother, sensitive situation. My ears rang. I told her that was not me. We listened to a voicemail, together that the front desk had saved. It was Heather. Her voice was sugar. Hi. I'm calling from my full name's office. We'd like to add 2 to the tasting. There's a reconciliation in the works and it's important. The coordinator and I both went silent. She apologized, I apologized, and then she said she would be flagging our account and requiring an ID check for any in-person inquiries. When I hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store and laughed, the kind of hysterical laugh that sits right on top of a sob. I wish I could say that was the end, but really, I think it was just the end of whatever thread had kept Heather near our orbit. Since then, she's been quiet. Tim told Mike he filed for a temporary separation. He also quietly sent me a photo of the agreement of boundaries in the trash next to those white gloves, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. We sent our formal invitations out last week. We didn't send one to Heather. We didn't send one to Tim either. He told us not to, and I respected that. We locked down our rehearsal details, we tightened our circle, and then we went to our tasting exactly as planned. We toasted to everyone who is still standing with us and to the people who chose to stand back. I don't know if Heather will stay gone. I do know there's no version of our lives where she comes back into mine. That sounds dramatic to write, but after the shower crash, the attempted vendor calls, the drive-by, the tasting stunt, it feels less like drama and more like finally listening to my own alarm bells and believing them. And for the first time since this started, I feel excited when I think about walking down my own aisle. Without code words. Without choreography. Without a single laminated rule. Just me and Mike, and the people who actually show up the right way. Update 3. 2 weeks before the wedding, my alterations lady called me from a number I didn't recognize and started with, "Sweetheart, do you have a password?" Someone had just tried to swing by and grab the veil for a last-minute steaming, using my full name plus a hyphen that isn't mine. They knew my dress designer, my size, even the color of my bustle ties. My stomach fell through the floor. I told her the word, the one we'd set for vendors months ago, and she breezed out and said, "Then the veil is staying exactly where it is." She moved it into the owner's locked office and asked me to text her a photo of my ID before every appointment from then on. I sat in my parked car outside the grocery store and stared at the steering wheel until the leather imprint on my fingers faded. The week of the wedding, our RSVP site pinged my email like a slot machine. 14 responses flipped from yes to no in under an hour. My Mo called me before I could finish the first panic text. The site had flagged the changes as being made from the same IP address in a different state. She reverted everything, turned on two-factor, and sent personal confirmations to the guests that it had toggled. People wrote back confused and kind. My aunt actually ended her email with, "We will stand up and block the doors if we need to." I laughed for the first time that day. Rehearsal day, our venue coordinator met me in the lobby with an apology face and a manila envelope. A woman had come by an hour early to check the acoustics and tried to sign in as my cousin. When they asked for ID, she said she'd left it in the car, set the envelope on the desk, and floated out. Inside was a printed addendum to agreement of boundaries with my name and an empty line where she'd put a signature block for my Mo. Someone had underlined, "No sustained eye contact" in pink, and stuffed 2 more pairs of gloves and Ziplocs like we were going scuba diving. The desk had saved the voicemail too, in case we wanted it for our report. We handed everything to the officer we'd been in touch with and walked into our rehearsal like we'd planned to the whole time. Mike's brother slid into being best man without a single ripple, like he'd been standing there in every version of this with us anyway. The morning of our wedding, my dad knocked on the suite door and asked me if I wanted coffee or quiet. My dress hung like a cloud from a pipe across the room. My phone buzzed and my coordinator answered it for me. Someone had called the church office to confirm the updated start time, and because the woman didn't have the passcode, they'd refused to say anything at all. My coordinator mouthed, handled, and set my phone face down. I let my mom zip my dress. I could smell lilacs from the bouquets and the starch on my dad's shirt when he hugged me and asked if I was ready. We walked. It felt like walking into a room I already lived in. My Mo and Mike's brother did their job exactly the way it should be done, which is to say, they existed in our periphery and not in the center. They smiled, they stood, they brought us our rings at the right moment, and no one performed a boundary contract at the altar. When the officiant pronounced us married, the sound in the room was warm and startled and so loud I felt it in my knees. I don't remember if I kissed Mike once or twice. I remember thinking, we did it. We got this day back. At cocktail hour, our planner showed me her tablet with a raised eyebrow. Someone had emailed the DJ the night before under a burner with a subject line that said surprise dedication for the happy couple and a word attachment named True Love Story. It had been caught by the filter and sat unopened. The DJ had already blocked the address and texted our code phrase back just to watch it bounce. I took a sip of champagne and told her, if the song isn't Don't Stop Me Now, I don't want to know. We made our entrance to our song anyway, loudly, messily, on purpose. People pounded the tables. It was everything I had wanted and nothing that wasn't invited got in. The only time I cried after the ceremony was during speeches. Mike's brother pulled a creased photo out of his pocket of the two of them at 15, sunburned, graining, scrawny as fence posts. He said, some of us grow up together by accident and some of us make the choice every day. I'm proud of both of you for choosing. He didn't say Tim's name. He didn't have to. Mike squeezed my knee under the linen so hard my leg went pins and needles. We danced and we ate cake and no one stood up in white gloves. The only unexpected guest was a thunderstorm that rolled past the windows, then the last hour like a drumline. We ran out onto the overhang at the very end for a sparkler send-off and looked out at the rain getting brighter instead of darker, and my mom yelled, "It's good luck," which is something moms say, and in that moment I believed her. We left our phones with my parents overnight. When we got them back in the morning there were three things waiting. A text from an unknown number that read, "You took my family," and then immediately, "Wrong number, sorry," like that fixed it. A voice memo from our venue's front desk of a call that came in at the end of the night, syrupy and familiar. "This is my name's assistant calling to authorize a key pickup for storage. We're sending 2 women in 20 minutes. The night manager had asked for ID and the passcode." There was no second sentence to that story. And an email to Mike from Tim, short and almost bare, "Congratulations. I filed yesterday. I won't be there today and I won't make that your problem. I'm sorry. I hope you're happy for 50 years. Mike replied, "You don't owe us martyrdom to prove anything. Yet well. We love you." I watched him type it and thought about the part of love that is just letting people choose where they stand and then respecting that they did. We took 2 days at a bed and breakfast upstate because neither of us had the stamina for an airport. We slept like we were being paid to. We ate eggs at a tiny table on a porch that smelled like tomato plants. I kept reaching for my phone and stopping myself. It was quiet in a way I had missed so much my bones hurt from it. When we came home there was a certified letter notice in our mailbox that had been attempted while we were gone. I didn't go to the post office. I printed another copy of our police case number and put it in the drawer with a warranty for the blender. That afternoon, the church secretary called to let me know a woman had stopped by asking if she could view the sanctuary where it all went wrong, and the secretary had told her the building was closed. She wanted to light a candle, the secretary said in that careful voice that means she can't tell when something is off even with the lights on. I suggested she light one at home. Last night, we opened gifts with my parents and my in-laws at our kitchen table. At the very bottom of one bag was a card that didn't have a return address. I handed it to Mike. He opened it, read it, and put it face down. "Do you want to know?" I asked. He shook his head and slid it back to me. It was from Tim. It was long. He said he'd started individual therapy. He said he was sorry for the ways he'd let someone else speak through him. He said he had a box of things he didn't know what to do with, old lanyards from games, a set of cufflinks, a frame ticket stub, and that if we wanted them, he'd leave them on my parents' porch when we were ready. He ended it with, "I'd like to meet your wife when I'm not someone you have to protect her from." I didn't realize I was crying until Mike laughed softly and wiped under my eye with his thumb and said, "You get to be the wife now. I don't have a ribbon to tie around this." There wasn't a last showdown in a parking lot or a public scene at the altar. There were a lot of near misses and laminated attempts that never became our problem because we didn't let them across the threshold. There is a police report with a boring number and a folder in my desk with printouts I'll probably never look at again. There is a husband in my bed who asked me this morning if pancakes count as a vegetable if you eat them next to strawberries. There is a family that closed ranks without demanding my blood to buy it. There is a friend who didn't need a title to be a guardian. Update 4. The certified letter did not stay theoretical. It came back wearing a different outfit tucked behind my screen door and a manila jacket with my full name in block letters and the county seal in the corner. It wasn't a cease and desist. It was a notice of hearing. Heather had filed for a civil harassment restraining order against me and my mo. Reading the words out loud made my mouth feel like it didn't belong to my face. The claims were a collage, that we had controlled her husband, used secret codes to restrict access to public accommodations, and orchestrated targeted humiliation. The attachments were screenshots of my florist lilac centerpiece mock-up and a photo of our save the date like those things were weapons. Our court date was 3 weeks out. Our case officer called me back the same afternoon and said, very gently, that people sometimes file preemptively because they are worried you'll file first. He said, show up. Bring what you have. Tell the truth. It sounded like something from a poster in a school counselor's office, and it also sounded like the only way through. My mo came over with her tote bag that could smuggle a small animal and set up on my kitchen island like she was staging an intervention for chaos. She had a binder with dividers labeled with months and a little envelope taped to the inside 4 USB drives. We printed every email and every burner text. We burned the voicemails to a thumb drive and named the files something boring. We added the police report, the vendor flags, the photo of the envelope left at the venue at desk. My dad slid a tray of sliced peaches between us like it was a war room and said, where's something with pockets? Judges like pockets. He meant be prepared, I think, but I did end up finding a dress with pockets and I did feel steadier with my hands in them. 2 nights before the hearing, my phone buzzed just after midnight with a text from a new number that read, you can't end this by apologizing in writing. I took a screenshot and didn't write back. The number disappeared in the morning like it had never owned a SIM card. Court smell, like lemon cleaner and old carpet. Everyone spoke in the register people use in libraries or funerals. We sat on a bench under a laminated sign about phones. Heather walked in a white blazer and shoes that sounded expensive on tile. Her mom was with her in a navy dress and a mouth like she was tasting something bitter. Heather carried a 3-ring binder with colored tabs that said things like evidence, narrative, and God help me boundaries, written in pink gel pen. She did not look at me. She looked through me the way people look through sliding glass doors to check the weather. Sim came too. He sat on the back bench like a kid in detention, hands folded, hair too clean. He nodded at Mike with the softest movement, one of those gestures, you feel more than you see. He didn't sit with her. He didn't sit with us either. He existed in the crack in the tile between 2 worlds he didn't know how to stand in yet. When the clerk called our case, my stomach did the thing roller coasters do when you cross the top and gravity takes over. We stood at separate tables. The judge was a woman with comfortable shoes and the kind of stare that collects information like lint. She asked Heather to speak first. Heather unfolded a prepared statement like it was origami. She talked about marital sanctity and agreed upon roles and how she had requested reasonable accommodations and we had weaponized professionalism to freeze her out. She held up the agreement of boundaries like a visual aid at a Tom meeting. She said the word predator in a sentence that made my ears ring. She cried without tears. The judge asked her 4 dates. 4 messages. 4 specific statements that indicated we would harm her or encouraged others to. Heather handed up screenshots of my bridal shower hydrangeas. The judge looked at them the way you look at a 3 of clubs when you need a king. When it was our turn, my mo slid our binder forward like she was diffusing something. We stuck to facts. Dates. Numbers. The officer's incident report. The vendor call logs with the time someone tried to change our RSVP list, the notes from the venue about the fake addition to our tasting, the voicemail transcriptions repeated in that sugar voice I know too well. We played 1 clip for the judge, the one where the assistant authorizes a key pickup. The fake name caught in the throat of the recording. The judge's eyebrows did a small, tired dance. She asked me if I wanted to request a protective order of my own. I hadn't planned to speak until that second, but I heard myself say yes. I told her I didn't feel safe when people drove by my house at night. I told her I cried at a brunch because a bag of gloves felt like a threat. I said I wanted to be done. Heather tried to interrupt. The judge is a mess. Last name could have iced a drink. She turned to Tim then, which I didn't expect, and asked if he intended to speak. He looked at Mike and then at me and then at the floor. He said, I won't speak against her. I will say these 2 did not provoke me and they did not contact me except to say please go through him, and he pointed at Mike. It took less than 2 sentences and all the air felt different afterward. The judge took 10 minutes that felt like 30 and came back with her decision like a stone she had weighed in her palm. She denied Heather's request. She granted ours. 2 years. No contact. No proxy contact. No coming to our work or our church. No online posts directed at us by name or detail. She said you are to leave them alone, to Heather in a voice you could stack books on. Heather opened and closed her mouth and then did not say anything else. I don't know what I expected in the hallway after nothing cinematic happened. Heather and her mom walked out ahead of us fast, like they were outrunning being seen. Tim hung back and put his hand to his chest when he looked at Mike in that small middle school boy way that means I'm sorry without saying it out loud. He told Mike he'd keep the order with him, that he'd talk to his attorney about adding himself to it if she tried to go through him. He asked if he could still use Mike as a reference for an apartment. Mike said yes without looking at me because he didn't have to check. We did something embarrassingly domestic next. We went to the grocery store. I needed garlic, and apparently that's what you do when a judge tells you you're allowed to be left alone. You'll buy garlic and green beans and a loaf of bread too big for it's bagged. In the parking lot, my mo wrapped both her arms around me and I finally let whatever had been sitting in my throat walk out of my body. I cried into her shoulder and she cried into my hair, and a man loading sparkling water into his trunk smiled at us like we were a commercial for friendship. Heather was quiet for 8 days. On the 9th, HR at my job forwarded me an email with the subject line "Concern for Employee Well-Being" that alleged I had been conducting retaliatory campaigns and misusing company time to call vendors. It named no vendors. It referenced agreements without names. HR asked me to provide any relevant context and then, in the next sentence, told me they had already attached the restraining order to my file and that any further emails of that nature would be routed to legal and security. I wrote back thank you and then closed my office door for 5 minutes and put my forehead on my desk. Tim texted Mike that weekend asking if he could drop the box off on my parents' porch. He did it at noon on a Saturday like we'd agreed, and my dad, who can't help himself, watched from behind a slat of the blinds because he is who he is. He said Tim got out of his car carrying the box like it was made of glass and stood for a second with his eyes closed after he set it down, then got back in his car and drove away without looking anywhere but the road. The box had the cufflinks, the lanyards, the frame. On top was a sheet of paper torn out of a spiral notebook. It said, "I don't know how to carry the version of me that hurt you. I'm going to put him down and try walking without him," in handwriting that looked like someone who'd stayed up too late. The only time I saw Heather after the hearing was not in person. It was on our doorbell camera. A woman in a hoodie with the drawstrings tight and walked up to our steps at dawn on a Wednesday. She set down a small votive candle in a glass holder in a grocery store, a bouquet of white carnations and a card with no writing on the envelope. She didn't stay. She didn't look around. She just walked away. The flame did not catch. The card was blank inside. The officer added it to our file and said, "Passively menacing still counts." I threw the carnations out with the coffee grounds and wiped the glass with a paper towel and a little blue cleaner and put it in a box by the blender warranty and the printout of the case number. My house smelled like clean windows for hours. We had promised ourselves a real honeymoon later when airports felt like a thing our nervous systems could tolerate, and then we did something reckless by our new standards. We booked it. 10 days. Somewhere with water you can see your feet in. I sent our itinerary to my parents and our mo, and also, for the first time, to our case officer, who wrote back, "Have a nice trip. Enjoy the ocean for me." I pressed my face to Mike's shoulder on the plane and tried to sleep while a child behind us kicked the seat with the predictable rhythm of a second hand. The world did not end while I napped. We landed and the air smelled bright and stupid with sunscreen. We stopped looking over our shoulders after day 3. On day 5, an email landed in Mike's inbox from Tim with one sentence and a photo. The sentence was, "I signed," and the photo was a scan of a stamped packet with a court date 3 months out. Mike typed back, "Proud of you," and I watched him attach a picture of the ocean at noon with the water the exact color of a bottle glass I used to collect when I was 7. Tim didn't respond right away. He didn't have to. On our last morning, I realized my shoulders had dropped an inch sometime when I wasn't watching. We ate pancakes with bananas and a ridiculous amount of powdered sugar, and the waiter asked if we were celebrating anything and Mike looked at me and said, quiet, like it was a holiday. On the flight home, I wrote him a short note I will hand him someday if that someday shows up, the kind you keep folded in your wallet for a long time and only take out when the timing is right. It starts with, "I am willing to know the version of you that puts him down." Back home, one more envelope arrived, this time certified with a sticker that was tired of being peeled. It was from Heather's mother, written in long swoops on legal pad paper in 3 paragraphs that sounded like a prayer and a threat put in a blender. It asked us to meet with her pastor. It used the phrase "restore order." It said there was still time to fix what you broke. My hands did not shake. I put it in the drawer. I texted our officer the photo and she wrote back, "Noted, because that is her love language and I'm grateful for it." I don't have a moral to press into your palm like a party favor. I have a piece of paper that says someone is not allowed to come near me, and I have neighbors who wave with their fingers when I walk past with a bag of trash in my slippers. I have a husband who calls from the produce aisle to ask if the strawberries look like pancakes could be vegetables today. I have a friend who labeled a tab in a binder after and then made sure I had one. I have a quiet that is muscle now, not just bones. And I have the small, precise relief that if someone knocks in the middle of the night, it is almost certainly a raccoon and not a woman with a laminated contract asking me for eye contact permissions at my own front door.